It's November 1932 in Western Australia, and the government has just sent a couple of soldiers armed with machine guns into the countryside with about 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Their target isn't exactly what you'd expect. It's an army, but an army of emus. That's right, emus. Not just one or two, but 20,000 of them. And by the time it's all said and done with, the Australian military, or in this case, two dudes with machine guns, they'll have lost the war, and the emu prevails. Today, I'm going to try baking damper bread, which is the bread that fueled the Australian frontier. And while I do that, I'm going to tell you about the time that Australia declared war on a bird and lost. After the First World War, thousands of Australian veterans came home to a government promise of land. Veterans who came home were handed plots of land and told to become farmers. The land was marginal at best, and many of these men had never even farmed a day in their life before the war. Then in 1929, wheat prices collapsed. The government promised subsidies to help the farmers stay afloat, but those subsidies never came. So, picture it. Men who had survived the horrors of the trenches, who were handed shitty land in a failing wheat market, and the government just told them to, deal with it? And in October of 1932, right when these farmers were preparing for harvest, about 20,000 emus appeared on the horizon. The enemy was digging in. So I'm going to be transparent here. The whole Emu War thing, well, it wasn't actually a war, so to speak. It was more like a cull. The war thing was more of a joke that the media picked up on later on. But the damage that these emus were causing was still very real. Before doing this video, I didn't actually know what an emu was. I thought it was more like some kind of llama or alpaca sort of thing. But turns out that emus are actually birds. These birds can grow up to 6 feet tall, weigh over 100 pounds, and they're the second largest living bird on Earth, behind only the ostrich. They can't fly, but they don't need to, because an emu can sprint close to 30 miles an hour. Back in 1922, the Australian government officially reclassified the emu as vermin, but mostly because they were just tearing holes in farmers' fences. In 1932, a drought pushed a massive migration of emus right into the heart of the wheat belt. To the emus, this newly cleared, freshly watered farmland must have looked like an all-you-can-eat buffet. I mean, the emus, they tore through those old rickety fences, they trampled over those farmers' crops and devoured all the wheat. See, the thing about damper bread is that it's simple but tough. I mean, this bread is meant to survive in the bush. It's about as tough, I suspect, as the birds that these farmers suddenly had to contend with. So, they brought in the big guns. Farmers were technically allowed to shoot the emus themselves, but with money and manpower already stretched thin by the Depression, they asked the government for another option. Not pest control, they wanted machine guns. Australia's Minister of Defense agreed. He sent Major G.P.W. Meredith, along with 2 soldiers, 2 Lewis machine guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammo. The operation was expected to be so successful and so newsworthy that the government actually sent along a cinematographer to film the whole thing. And boy, were they in for a show. On November 2nd, 1932, the operation began near a small town called Campion. The soldiers spotted about 50 emus and tried to drive them into range with the help of some local farmers. But the emus, perhaps irritated by the prospect of being massacred, they didn't cooperate. They scattered into small, fast-moving groups. That looks like a pretty good loaf. And most escaped before the hired guns could find them. 2 days later, Meredith, he planned an ambush. This time at a local dam where about 1,000 emus had gathered to drink. The soldiers waited until the birds were at point-blank range before they opened fire. He had them right in his crosshairs, and he would have nailed them, If only those pesky Lewis guns hadn't jammed. After only downing a dozen or so of the birds in his previous ambush, Meredith tried a different tactic. He mounted a machine gun on the back of a truck to chase the birds down, but the terrain was rough and the emus fast. After 6 days, 2,500 rounds used, and one crashed truck, they'd only managed to kill between 50 and 200 emus. And that's out of 20,000. Major Meredith later said that the emus, quote, can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. The whole operation was shut down in December of 1932. Meredith reported killing about 986 birds and used about 9,860 rounds of ammo, which works out to exactly 10 bullets for every single bird. Newspapers seized on the humiliation. The press started referring to the operation as Meredith and his merry men. It was a waste of money, a waste of resources, and a waste of time. And the government that had planned this whole clusterfuck of a cull would soon start to feel the heat. The failure of this cull was significant enough that it was debated in the Australian House of Representatives. But the emus were still destroying crops. Further military assistance was refused, and the government switched to a bounty system instead, paying farmers directly to manage the birds themselves. Today, Australia still uses fences rather than firearms to manage the emu movement. And the emu, the bird that outlasted Meredith's machine guns, still stands on Australia's coat of arms, right next to the kangaroo. The lesson here is one of the oldest in the book. Know your enemy. The army had the guns and the ammo. What they didn't have was the first idea about what they were actually up against. Know your enemy, or don't. In that case, be prepared to lose to a bird. And to the emus, victory never tasted so good.